Mrs. Ratter. Today our lesson is actually going to start off with a story to introduce us to a movement in art and also one of my favorite artists, Andy Warhol. So the story I have for you today is called Dropping In on Andy Warhol. That's what it looks like. Okay. And it's written by Pamela Stevens and illustrated by Jim McNeil. Hello, welcome to New York City. My name is Puffer. I am on my way to visit the famous American artist Andy Warhol. Would you like to come along? Wow! There is the Statue of Liberty! Puffer is polite and tips his hat to the statue, but he does not know how to fly very well. Puffer loses his balance and falls from the sky. Flutter, flap, 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 flutter, flap, crash, bump, thump. Puffer falls into a group of dogs that are being walked on the sidewalk. The dogs and their walker do not say a word. They pretend not to see Puffer.
Excuse me, do you know where I might find Mr. Andy Warhol?
One dog points across the street.
I see. Thank you very much.
Good thing Puffer asked for a pointer. Above the doorbell is a sign. Andy Warhol, the factory, reads Puffer. This must be the place. Puffer rings the bell. Buzz! The bell sounds. In a moment, the door opens. Mr. Warhol? Yes, the man at the door says. Hello, Mr. Warhol. I'm Puffer. The interviewer. You are expecting me, sir? Oh, hi, Puffer, says Mr. Warhol. Gosh, it's nice to meet you. Won't you come in? Thank you. That would be splendid. Welcome to the factory, said Mr. Warhol. The factory? I thought we were at your studio. The factory is my studio, replies Mr. Warhol. Why don't you call your studio a factory? Gee, why not? Mr. Warhol shrugs. But things we buy in stores are made in factories. Don't you think that art can be made in a factory? Mr. Warhol asks. Do you think art could be made in a factory? I've never heard of artwork like that before. Said Mr. Warhol. Maybe you need to learn more about art. The title of this painting is Big Torn Campbell's Soup Can Pepper Pot, says Mr. Warhol. I see why you call it that. It looks just like a soup can with a torn label. Yes, it does, Mr. Warhol answers. Is this a special kind of art, Mr. Warhol? Well, sure, Mr. Warhol replies. It's called pop art. What is pop art? Pop art gets ideas from everyday life, says Mr. Warhol. Where did you get your idea for this painting? Where do you think? Mr. Warhol asks. From the supermarket? Or maybe your kitchen? What do you guys think? Where did Mr. Warhol get his idea for his painting? Mr. Warhol nods. Would you like to see another pop art painting? He asks. Yes, please. The title of this painting is DoItYourself, said Mr. Warhol. Do-it-yourself paintings were popular hobbies at one time. Do you see why it's called a do-it-yourself painting? Your painting is very big, Mr. Warhol. It's almost as tall as you. Were all do-it-yourself paintings this big? Oh, no, answers Mr. Warhol. Do-it-yourself paintings were small. They were sold in little art kits. Well, what was in the art kits? What do you guys think? A drawing, some paintbrushes, and some tiny cans of paint, said Mr. Warhol. Why are those numbers on the paintings? Why do you think there's numbers there? What are all those numbers meant for? Do-it-yourself paintings had numbers on them, explains Mr. Warhol. The numbers matched those in the tiny cans of paint. I see. A painter just had to match the numbers and fill in the spaces. Anyone could be an artist. Almost anyone could try to be an artist, said Mr. Warhol. Then he asks, would you like to see some pop art sculptures now? Those just look like boxes to me. This looks like a room filled with cardboard boxes, says Puffer. We're thinking the same thing. Ha! Mr. Warhol laughs. You've been tricked. I have? These are not cardboard boxes, Mr. Warhol says. If they are not cardboard boxes, then what are they? Each box is a sculpture made from wood, Mr. Warhol answers. What about the designs on the boxes? Oh, those are screen prints, he replies. Screen prints? I make all sorts of screen prints, says Mr. Warhol. Let me explain. There are many ways to make a screen print, begins Mr. Warhol. I like to use photographs in mine. Then Mr. Warhol adds, if you'll take a picture of yourself, I'll tell you how to make a screen print. Puffer smiles, tips his hat, and takes his own photograph. Very good, said Mr. Warhol. Now listen carefully. This is how a photo screen print is made. Instead of printing the picture on a piece of paper, like a regular photograph, it's printed onto a silk screen, explains Mr. Warhol. Mr. Warhol shows Puffer a silk screen. See the tiny holes? Puffer nods. When the photo is put on the screen, some of the holes are covered up and some of the holes are left open. Mr. Warhol goes on. You can see right in this picture, this is the silk screen, and the magnifying glass is bringing it up nice and close so you can see all the tiny holes. When ink is put on the screen, it goes through the tiny hole openings. It's like using a stencil. We use a lot of stencils in our class. You can make the same picture again and again, or you can change the colors every time. Would you like to see one of my screen prints that uses different colors? Asked Mr. Warhol. Yes, please. Good. I know just the one to show you. And here is a quick example of showing the paint. The ink is going on, it's rolling off, and it's making different colored prints of the same picture. Whoa! It's 4 pictures of you, Mr. Warhol. Yes, Mr. Warhol agrees. This is called a self-portrait. And we've already done our self-portraits this year. Remember, a self-portrait is a picture of yourself. I know what a self-portrait is. It's a picture that an artist makes of himself. A self-portrait always gives clues about the artist. So, said Mr. Warhol, what clues about me do you see in my self-portrait? What do you guys think? I think self-portrait makes you seem mysterious. Why do you say that? Asks Mr. Warhol. The first clue is that your face is in the shadows. I can't tell where you're looking. Another clue is the way your chin's resting on your hand. You could be thinking about something important, or You could just be daydreaming. What else do you see? Asks Mr. Warhol. Your face is all sorts of unusual colors. Why would you do that? Why not? Replied Mr. Warhol. Would you tell me a little bit more about your life, Mr. Warhol? Oh, sure, Mr. Warhol replies. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1928, and I have 2 brothers. My parents were from Czechoslovakia. I went to school in Pittsburgh, said Mr. Warhol. In the 4th grade, my teacher saw that I was a good artist. Soon after that, I got to go to Sunday art classes. I was sick for a while, and I had to stay in bed. I did lots of drawing and coloring and cutting. That helped me be a better artist. My brother also helped me to write to movie stars. It was great fun. The mail would come, and there was an autographed photo from a real movie star. I had lots of autographs. After I finished high school, I went to college to study art. I moved to New York City, and soon I graduated from college. My first art job was in New York, drawing ads and decorating store windows. I even won some awards. I also had a job in television. I drew little pictures on weather maps for the nightly news. Nobody knew who I was, but my hands were famous. You were a busy artist, Mr. Warhol. Did you know that Warhol is not my real name? No, I didn't. My last name is really Warhola. When somebody spelled my name wrong, I decided it was a good name to keep. And a good name it is. Puffer's been taking a lot of notes. He's pretty tired of writing. Would you like to take a break, Puffer? Asks Mr. Warhol. Maybe you'd like to see another work of art. Yes, please. That'd be splendid. Let me think. What would be a good artwork to show you? I think I know just the right one. I think you'll recognize the person in the portrait that I'm about to show you. Do you guys think you're going to recognize who this person is? I don't know. I think we're all a little too young for this. Mrs. Ratter knows. Maybe your parents will know. Let's see. I know who it is. It's a portrait of Mick Jagger, the famous rock star. Yes, you're right, Mr. Warhol says. I made 10 portraits of Mr. Jagger. Each portrait was printed many times. This is just one of those portraits. How did you make this portrait? I first painted sweeps of color on a canvas and then printed a photograph over the colors, explained Mr. Warhol. I also seen some drawings and portraits. You are a careful observer, Puffer. Puffer grins and thanks Mr. Warhol before he asks his next question. What other ideas can pop art show? Mr. Warhol thinks for a moment. I once made some pop art about animals. Could I see one of those pictures? Sure. I call this print bald eagle. The bald eagle is the national bird of the United States. Why would we make a picture of a bald eagle? Mr. Warhol explains, I'm very interested in animals and ecology. Not too long ago, the bald eagles were an endangered species. Making a picture of a bald eagle would help people to learn about it. I like the way that you have placed the eagle on the page. The eagle's head is turned to the side so that we can see the curved beak. This makes the eagle look strong and brave. I also like the way that you have used your pop art style. Anyone would know an Andy Warhol made this print. The bright colors and the scribble outlines would tell me that you made this picture. Finding out about artists and their artworks help us to understand about different times, places, and ideas. Think about what you've learned about pop art the next time you see a work of art by Andy Warhol, try to figure out how the artwork was made or what it was about. If you ever visit Pittsburgh, be sure to visit the Andy Warhol Museum. Until we meet again, goodbye. So that was a quick, fun little story about our artist Andy Warhol. I hope you boys and girls learned something new about him. I do want you to just keep in mind that though our story kind of went on to talk a lot about many different styles of pop art that Andy Warhol focused on, what I really want you boys and girls to remember is that pop art really was all about popular culture and things that were popular during that time. So when Andy Warhol was creating a lot of his works of art, he focused on things that were popular while he was creating that artwork. So his Campbell soup can was really popular then. Making his cardboard boxes out of wood, the Brillo, the Heinz ketchup, all of those themes and those styles were very popular back then. Same thing with our rock star from the end of our story that I wasn't sure we'd be able to guess, Mick Jagger, because he was more famous and popular during your parents' and grandparents' time as a child rather than you guys now. So we've talked in class about things that would be popular now, such as Fortnite or JoJo, just to name a few. So when we go ahead today to create our pop art style, I want you to think about some of the things that are popular or cool that you are interested in today.